The title of my sermon this morning is, I am willing, be cleansed. And that's actually Jesus' words to the unclean man, to the leper. And the passage that I'm going to be going through this morning is Mark chapter 1, verses 35 through 45. And I'm breaking this up a little bit. Even though they flow in the scripture, it seems like there's a little bit of division there, but yet it goes together. So I'm just going to read through this and make some comments here. In the early morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up and left the house and went away to a secluded place and was praying there. Simon and his companions searched for him. They found him and said to him, "Everyone is looking for you." He said to them, "Let us go somewhere else, to the towns nearby, so that I may preach there also, for that is what I came for." Sorry that those red letters don't show up real well on that screen. It kind of messes with my eyes a little bit. But those are Jesus' words. And those really jumped out to me. Let us go somewhere else, to the towns nearby, so that I may preach there also, for that is what I came for. We look back in verse 35, and it really speaks to us that we need to spend a lot of time in prayer, because here's Jesus, right? I mean, this is Jesus, even though he's 100% man, he's 100% God. And notice that he got up early in the morning. And I'm not a morning person myself too much. And then I noticed it's while it was still dark. So it's really early. And it's something I guess for me, when I see the light coming through the window, that's kind of what wakes me up a lot of times. But anyway, as servants of God, our power comes through prayer. And even Jesus, we see here, needed to pray. And he prayed, again, early in the morning while it was still dark. And I'm guessing that this was probably a habit for him. Because if you look in the preceding verses, Jesus it was the Sabbath. The day before was the Sabbath. And ask any pastor or anybody that does ministry, for some reason, Sundays will just wipe you out at the end of the day. And Jesus didn't just get up and preach to them a 20 or 30 minute message here. Jesus was doing ministry all day long. He was teaching, probably refuting some stuff, explaining things, but he was also healing people. And you know, over where the woman touched his garment, it said Jesus could actually feel the virtue go out of him. So I'm sure that the human side of Jesus was absolutely exhausted. So probably it was just his habit to get up and to go out early in the morning. But we at least know that he recognized that he had a need and to spend time with God. And he went to a secluded place, and you think, well, why did he do that? I mean, he actually left the house, and I don't know that we all need to do that, but he went to a secluded place because he didn't want to be distracted. He wanted it to be quiet. He wanted to spend personal time with God. And I can't help but think if Jesus needed to spend so much time with God in prayer, how much time do I need to spend? How much time do you need to spend? And prayer is an interesting thing, and the Bible talks a lot about it. And I have a few verses here that really speaks to that. Just as reminders, in Matthew it says, "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." And then in John, "Hitherto have ye asked nothing in my name? Ask, and ye shall receive, that your joy may be full." And then in Ephesians it says, "Praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplications for all saints." So we're supposed to pray for each other. And then the familiar verse there, "Pray without ceasing" in 1 Thessalonians. And I was thinking about this idea of prayer. It was important to Jesus. It should be really important to us. And I think it is at a certain level for sure. Have you ever noticed that in Bible studies, that's one of the favorite topics is prayer. If you're going to do a Bible study and you ask somebody, or ask the crowd that's going to participate, what would you want to study? Most people will say prayer somewhere in the mix, or at least it's going to come up. And I was just thinking about this morning, actually, and I was thinking, I think I have the answer. Because why do we want to do Bible studies on prayer? Typically, it's because we want to be able to pray more effective. We want to be able to learn the secret to praying that God responds and does whatever we're asking him to do. Right? I mean, if we're being honest, that's usually why we want to study prayer. Is just to be really good at it. And I was thinking about it this morning and I realized a light bulb went off. I have the answer for you. I'm going to tell you the key to praying effectively. And let me start with a little analogy. Does anybody here like the fish? Yeah, a couple of you. You of you? If you like this fish and you really want to catch a lot of fish and you really want to catch the big fish, what do you have to do? What's the secret? I'm guessing some of you know. We've got a few fishermen. If you want to catch fish, what's the secret to catching fish?
Patience.
Patience. It's probably so simple you're overthinking it. You have to go fishing. If you want to be effective at prayer, you have to pray. You just have to pray. Because it came to me this morning, and I've thought a lot about prayer, read books on prayer, studied it. And I'm always looking for that little key, that thing of like, how can I don't think God really cares at my approach, or what words I say, or what order, or how good my grammar is, and it's not. I don't think God cares. You know what I think God cares about? It's just the fact that I pray. And not just when I want something, but that I have a habit of praying, that I take praying seriously, that I appreciate and love spending time with the Father. That's what I think God is interested in, and I think Jesus knew that. And I think this was a habit of his. I think he got up early and he prayed every day. I mean, why would you get up before dark when you're wore out and tired if it wasn't something you normally did, and at least that you felt the need to do that? So moving on. In verse 36, we see that Simon and the others went looking for him. They were looking for Jesus. And in verse 37, the disciples were basically telling Jesus, like, hey, let's just stay here in Capernaum because the people here, they like you and they're ready to follow you. And actually in Luke, if you read this account in Luke, it tells us that the crowd actually came out as well, and they was physically trying to restrain, not like tackle him, but they was trying to get Jesus to stay with them. They did not want him to leave. And it must have been tempting. The devil even used this type of temptation to Jesus to get him to do something spectacular so that he could kind of get the show off, kind of, so to speak, and make it about himself, to appeal to Christ's human side and to just to drag him down. But think about it. You're Jesus, right? And you know what you're facing. You know a lot of people don't like you, and all of a sudden now you're talking to these people in Capernaum and in this one particular place, and the people like you. I can tell you, as trying to do what we're doing here, it's a whole lot easier to preach to a crowd that you feel like likes you versus a crowd that you think, well, maybe they don't. It's a lot easier. And it had to have been tempting for Jesus just to stay right there I mean, Jesus knew why the people were coming. He knew why they liked him. He wasn't dumb. I mean, he knew that it was basically for what they could get out of him. He understood that. But Jesus stayed committed to the call. He knew what he was sent there for. And I love what Jesus said. In verse 38, he said, "Let us go somewhere else to the towns nearby, so that I may preach there also, for that is what I came for." And that really hit me this week as I was studying and going through this passage. Jesus wanted to fulfill his calling. And the thought came to me, if we are to be Christ-like, get tired of me saying this, but our calling is to be like Jesus did, or like Jesus was. He knew what his mission was, and he wasn't going to be sidetracked. And I was reading it in a commentary, and it said this, and I thought it was worth sharing. Jesus was thoroughly convinced. Plenty of needs may still have existed, but two critical facts were being overlooked. Facts which have been and are still being sadly overlapped by believers everywhere today. The first fact, Capernaum and its people, at least many of its people, had already heard the gospel preached. If God's messenger, which was Jesus, had stayed in Capernaum, many throughout the world would never have heard the gospel. So if he would have been kind of seduced by this idea of being popular and just staying, okay, I found a place, people like me, I'm just going to hang out here, and not went to the other areas, we possibly wouldn't have heard either. Fact number 2, the people in Capernaum could now share the message themselves. Imagine that. The people in Capernaum could now share the message themselves. God's messenger, again, Jesus, was not really needed to continue the ministry. The people were much more likely to assume the responsibility to carry on if Jesus left. But if Jesus had stayed, the people would have left most of the responsibility up to him. The people would not become the witnesses that they should. And I couldn't help but think about when we left St. Louis. We'd been there for years, and we've been working with the people, discipling them, and it's hard to get them to move out, and it always is, to get them to engage in the ministry. And it just hit me one day, and they asked me, it's like, oh, you got to stay. And I told them, I said, the problem is if we stay and do it for you, you're going to let us. You get that? If Jesus would have stayed and done it for them, they would have been happy to let him. Verse 39 says, he went into their synagogues throughout all Galilee, preaching and casting out the demons. Galilee was densely populated during that time. There were somewhere in that district, there were over 200 cities. And it says that Jesus went throughout all of Galilee. He didn't just stay still. He was out. He was moving. He was sharing. And I love that. And I'm so glad that Jesus went. Because as a result of that, the next part of this, these verses really come in. And it resulted in two of my, maybe not my absolute favorite, but 2 favorite verses come out of this. And this has meant so much to me in life. And I feel like this went with what Jasmine was talking about. It went with the words of the message of the song. In verses 40 and 41, verse 40, and a leper came to Jesus, beseeching him and falling on his knees before him and saying, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Don't you love that? I mean, this guy, this leper, like the man that Jasmine was talking to, the way he felt about himself. I mean, this leper knew he wasn't supposed to get close to anybody, let alone Jesus, right? Let alone a teacher or a rabbi. He's not supposed to get close to anyone. He's unclean. As he walked along, he has to yell out, unclean, unclean, so that people would stay away from him. But because someone had told him about Jesus, because someone dared to share that good news with him, and because of his utter desperation, he couldn't do anything for himself. He was so desperate. And because he had heard who Jesus was, he had whatever it took. And it probably took everything in him. You can just picture that scene in your mind. For him to come up to Jesus and just fall on his knees before him. He's not even supposed to be close to him. He has no right to be there. Just like us, we don't have any right whatsoever to be able to come before Christ and to fall at his knees. But listen, this leper, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And notice Jesus' response. Moved with compassion. Compassion is love that takes action. Moved with compassion, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him. It's like giving him that hug, Jasmine. He touched him, even though he's unclean. He touched him. And he said, I am willing. Be cleansed. Isn't that beautiful? Why is this such a big deal? Why do we care about a leper? Well, leprosy in the Bible was mentioned about around 40 times. So why was it mentioned so much? Well, the main reason that it's talked about so much is that leprosy is a graphic illustration of sin's destructive power. And it was a powerful object lesson that showed the people, both then and now, about how destructive and how sin can ruin and utterly destroy a person and ruin their lives. And it was to show them how destructive sin itself is. So these two verses, part of the reason that I like them so much, it reminds me of myself. It reminds me of that Sunday morning. And I hadn't been accustomed to going to church. I'd left so long. I told you this story before. But when I came to Jesus, I was sick and tired of being who I was. I didn't want to be that person anymore. I had so much anger, so much sin in my life, and so many things. And I knew from my upbringing, because my parents had taught me what it was really like to serve Jesus. And I knew I was lost. I knew I was utterly lost. And just like this man, God somehow gave me and drew me to a point where I fell on my knees and poured out my heart to God in my way, in my words. But basically, I was saying the same thing. If you will, you can make me clean. Because, I knew what God could do in people's lives. I knew he could transform me. I knew he could take away the old man and make something new and better. And make me fit for heaven someday. How did I know that? I had seen it in other people's lives. I had seen him take ruined lives and put it back together. And of course, then there's that verse that we know. Let's see if I can find it here, because I wanted to give you the reference of it. You could probably quote it. But it's in 1 John chapter 1 and verse 9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. I knew that. I knew. Somebody had told me, my parents had told me, I had seen it lived out. So it was some sort of confidence, not in myself, because there was nothing I could do to change who I was, but I was able to come to Christ and fall to my knees, as it were. And literally, I did fall to my knees. And with expectation, know that Jesus could do something for me. And again, this beautiful picture of what God does in these verses, falling on his knees before him and saying, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And moved with compassion, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed. And folks, if you're here today, if there's something you're struggling with, maybe it's not that that you're not saying that, but if there's something you're struggling with and you think that there's no hope, it's impossible. The Sunday school lesson this morning about Sarah and Abraham having the baby, it was impossible as far as they were concerned, but not for God. And your situation's no different, because in that passage there in Genesis, it talks about, I got the reference right, but it talks about with God, all things are possible. Nothing is too hard for Jesus. I don't care what you're going through today. I don't care what your kids are going through. I don't care what your grandkids are facing. It doesn't matter. Because God is still God. The same God that reached down and can touch this man and tell him to be cleansed. It's just that simple for him. He can speak it, and the winds and the seas obey just the command of his voice. That's the God we serve. If we could get hold of that and understand who God really is, our stuff's going to start looking pretty small. Because God, he loves you. He loves you so much. And he is willing to do. When we come as that leper, when we fall, because that leper was asking if it's your will. We don't come demanding, we don't come commanding Christ to do something. That's not the way this works. But when we come before Jesus and we just simply say, God, if it's your will, I need your help. I need your help. We can expect God to work in his way. I love this leper's response. In verses 42 through 45, immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. And he, Jesus, sternly warned him and immediately sent him away. And he said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourselves to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded as a testimony to them. So he knew it was going to be a testimony to all these high priests, right? Verse 45. But he went out and began to proclaim it freely and to spread the news around to such an extent that Jesus could no longer publicly enter a city, not the city where he was at, a city, but stayed out in unpopulated areas. And they were coming to him from everywhere. You know, some commentators speculate, it's like, well, boy, this leper really messed it up for Jesus. I mean, he went, he was disobedient, and because he talked about it, and because of his disobedience, then Jesus couldn't go into the city and, hindered his ministry and all this and that. I don't believe that. I simply don't believe that. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I just don't believe that. I believe that Jesus knew absolutely that this man was going to go and talk. And Jesus was okay with that, because you notice that people in all these cities said, yes, Jesus, he couldn't go into any city. Over 200 of them. Right? So, Jesus knew. He knew that people would come out to him. I think Jesus absolutely knew the response. And you know why? Because this is the response of every sinner after God forgives his sins. We can't help. If you've been truly forgiven, you can't help but to tell others. Now, I know according to statistics, and these are scary, that only about 2% of people that profess to be saved actually ever share their faith. And those that do share their faith share it within that, usually in that first year of when they got saved. Well, in an older congregation, that could have been a while back when we got saved, right? So we got to work at this thing. But Nevertheless, Jesus knew what the natural response was going to be, that he was going to go tell. And this leper told so many people about what Jesus had done that verse 45 again said they couldn't enter into a city, and there's like 200 of them. So I'm thinking that this leper was probably the guy that you want on your missions team, right? I mean, this guy told some people, and the word really spread. So but think about it. He was unclean. He was going to die. I mean, this guy, his flesh was rotting off. He hadn't got healed. How could you not tell somebody, right? I want to remind you that Jesus today is still full of that love and compassion, the same as he was then. And again, if you're here struggling with something, just bring it to Jesus with that same humble attitude of that leper. Fall on your knees before God and just present your need to him and have expectation. You know, that's part of having faith. And faith is hard to explain. It's hard to develop. But as Andy was referring to in our lesson this morning, there's a really neat thing that I should have just been here with that. I could have skipped half my sermon by relaying it to you. But the neat thing is when Jesus approached a man and he says, if you believe, and the man says, I believe. And then he said, help my unbelief. As Andy was pointing out, is that you just have a little bit of faith. God will take that faith. He will work with what you have, and he will give you the faith that you need to move those mountains in your life. And just always remember to give God the honor and glory for what he does. Tell others about it. That's one of the best ways you can do that. That's all I have for you this morning. Thank you for your attentiveness, and I hope that speaks to you. As I'm preparing these messages, sometimes it's just like, wow, God's giving me these thoughts. Like, I hadn't seen it that way, or this. And I just pray, and I thank God that he somehow helps me to take what he's given me here as I write it down, and that I somehow can bring it to you all, and it still makes sense to you guys once I try to say it. And so anyway, I hope you got something out of it. Does anybody have anything? Any thoughts? Anybody want to pray?